Hi, this is Jason from Effective Dashboards and welcome back to another video. In this video I'm going to look at the gauge visualization, and I'm going to look at how to configure the gauge visualization, and I'm going to look at one type of data that you should not use a gauge for, one type that might be quite useful, and another couple that might be considerations. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm going to go and add a new gauge, and I'm going to go and add in the first value here that I've got. So I've got various different data sets set up with types of data that might be for different scenarios. So this one here, we're looking at work order data, and this is a count of the sum of the number of hours that are overdue. So it's number of hours against overdue work. So let's add that in here, and let's just explore how to set this up to begin with. So there's 5 options in the field well. The first one is the value, and we can see once we add the value in, it's automatically going to show us the value here, and it's going to automatically set the lower and upper ranges of the actual gauge itself. So 0 is the bottom, which is defaulted, and that's fine, that makes total sense. But the upper value here is 44,000, which is double the current value. So that's the first thing I will say, is that if your data has got no obvious and sensible upper limit, then a gauge is not going to be a great use of the data. Okay, so in this example here, the backlog could be 22,000, but it could just as easily be 1,000, 100, or 122,000. There's no real upper limit here that makes sense. And the reason we need an upper limit to make sense is because this fill here needs to be will be compared to the gauge itself. Now, if this fill is halfway, automatically you're thinking, well, it's halfway, but there's a 50% progress, or there's 50% of the way towards a target, or 50% of it towards the upper range, which is good or bad. So you're automatically drawing a comparison between the fill and the upper limit here. Now, if that changes each time this number changes here and is just double all of the time, then this is not going to make any sense. Okay, so it needs to be, first of all, absolutely needs to have a meaningful upper range to be able to set the size of the gauge. So that said, let's go and look at some of the other options here. So within the field well, we've got the minimum value, so we can set that using a measure, which I'm going to show you in a second. We've got the maximum value and we've got the target, so we can use measures to either set these values here. There's not a target shown on, we're going to add that in a minute, but we can set the upper value, the lower value, and some sort of target, and that can be either static or dynamic. So let's go and look at the formatting options here. So if you want these to be static and you're happy with them to be static, then you can actually type in the minimum, maximum, and target values straight into here. So say we wanted that to be 1,000, we wanted that to be 25,000, and maybe we wanted the target to be 15,000. We can see that we've got these values here: 10,000, 15,000, 25,000. So now this means this fill here is essentially showing a percentage, or towards this target here. Now if that target doesn't mean anything, then this doesn't mean anything either. We've got a target value here, so we can see that we're well over the target, and but these are all set static. So if you needed to change these, you need to go and update your Power BI desktop file and then publish it back up to the servers again. So you need to be fairly confident that they're good values and don't get updated very often. Next thing we've got is the colours. So there's lots of options here for configuring the colours of the various aspects of the dashboard, or the gauge. So the fill colour can be changed. Now that can be changed either manually, selecting a colour which is not dynamic, or you can actually use this conditional formatting option here. And we can see there's 2 options. There's a scale and there's rules. Now rules is the one we'd use here, and let's just add that in: greater than or equal to 15,000 and less than maximum. Then we might want this to be a red colour. Okay, so we can set up rules and we can cascade these rules as well. And we can see here that it's red because it's bigger than this 15,000 here. So that's the first option. Now each of those, whenever you see one of these FX buttons, each of those options is available for the target as well, so we can configure the target. We've got the data label, which is, if I switch that off, is just the minimum and maximum values here, and again they can be configured using conditional formatting. We've got the target, which is actually the target label here rather than the target line. So the target line is actually this value here. Let me just put that to white. Okay, so that's the target line is there, and then the target value is here under target, and then we've got the callout value there. We can switch each one of these out for the on, and again this has got the same idea, conditional format there. So we can use the built-in rules to conditionally format most of the aspects of this, in fact all of the aspects of this. You can probably do the title as well. Let's look in here, yeah. So the Power BI team have been working to basically make conditional formatting something that's available to most visualizations and most elements within the visualization. So it's something important that your dashboards will be better for if you understand how to use those. So that's the first thing. If you are interested in understanding more about conditional formatting, check out, I've got a course below that's dedicated to conditional formatting and setting up a KPI management system, Power BI Quick Start Plus. Now, if you sign up to that and have a look at it, or have a look at the course, you can get the first few lessons for free, and those lessons will go into a lot more depth in these options here. So it's worth it if you want to go and configure the, or want to understand how the out-of-the-box standard conditional formatting builder works. And I go into a lot of detail there. So check it out if you're interested in that. Okay, so yeah, that's it. Conditional formatting is the key here, changing the colours. Not a lot of other additional bits and pieces here, all around the border and the shadow and stuff like that. All the usual stuff is there. So let's look at an example of when a gauge might be a really more of an appropriate visualization. Before I do that, I just want to highlight one other thing. If you're using multiple gauges, then you can see here that the actual upper and lower limits will actually be formatted, the placement will be formatted by Power BI based on where the target is and where the actual, if there's a target, there's no control over that. And consequently what you've got is, even though each one of these is exactly the same size, from a visualization sort of border standpoint, they've been rendered at different sizes and it looks just unwieldy and awkward. So not something you would use for multiple gauges if because you've got no control over where those values sit. So that's another hint that I would recommend. So let's look at an example where a gauge might be quite useful. So in this example here, I have got a measure of the production of a manufacturing facility year to date. Okay, so it's 11th of May. This bar here is representing the cumulative production. This target is the target at that particular point in time. So what is my expected target at this point in the year? And this upper range here is the target for production units by the end of the year. So we've got each of the aspects we need to have in place. We've got, first of all, a meaningful upper and lower range. At the start of the year it's 0, at the end of the year it's 55 million. And this fill here means something, because as we go through the year we're expecting this to be, this fill to move across to the right hand side. And the colour of the fill means, indicates if we're above or below the target. Now for this one here, what I've used, for these two here, the colour of the actual callout and the colour of the fill, I've used a conditional formatting measure. So let me talk you through how I've done that. So if we go into production units, I'll have a quick look at the data just so you can see that. We can see here that there's a day, and we've got a number of units produced each day, and we've got a target each day. Okay, so we can see by summing up the year-to-date production total, we've got, on any one day we know what the cumulative total is, and by summing up these target values here, on any day we know what the target is on that day, or what the target of the cumulative production should be on that day. So that's exactly what I've done with these measures in here. And you can download this file and you can check out these measures. I'll just quickly show you year-to-date total is using this calculate statement, and we're using this year-to-date total function to total up the production units across the date range here, which is in this dates table. And the year-to-date total target is exactly the same approach, but we're actually summing up the total target values to the current day and across the dates table. So it's all set up in here, and you can copy that if you want. It's not the video for going into this sort of detail at this moment. I'm just really trying to focus on the actual visualization. So yeah, as the in terms of setting up the conditional formatting, I'm going to go and apply it to this value here, just to show you how you would do that. So we've got this measure that I've created, and we can see here we use a switch statement. So I've got a video link below to how the switch statement works, but essentially it's to prevent you using nested if statements. So I quite like it. It looks a lot neater as well when you see it laid out. But what I've done is I've got, if the production unit year-to-date total is greater than the production unit year-to-date total target, then the output's going to be green. If the production total year-to-date is less than the production total year-to-date target, then it's going to be red. So all we're doing is using this to output a color, and that color is going to be an input into the conditional formatting of these values here, but I'm going to use it again on this value here. So let's go to the target, we're going to open this up, and I'm going to select this value here, and then here we're going to go under production, and I'm going to select this measure here that I've created. And we can see it's now being conditionally formatted. So I've used the same measure to conditionally format each one of these. So if we go to the data colors, click on the fill, we can see I've used that measure there. So we can define a measure in one place, and we can use it in multiple different conditional formatting applications. So again, we'll go into that in a lot more detail in the course, powered by Quick Start Plus. And yeah, if you're interested in that type of thing, then check it out for sure. So as the dates move on, so let's move it on a little bit here. We can see that this nudges up each time, and I would probably change these roundings because they're not showing us really the it's not that one there. Let's put that as auto. It's actually the target, and we've got the callout. So yeah, so now we can see clearly that this is the target is here and the value is there. So I've conditionally formatted the target. It's probably not appropriate to conditionally format as many things in here. The fill and the actual value is probably enough, but I just wanted to show you how we would apply that conditional formatting measure to a value within the actual dashboard itself, within the visualization. So yeah, and I think it fits nicely. An alternative is a bullet chart. So a bullet chart is always an alternative, and probably the first port of call before using a gauge. So I've got one I've created earlier. So if I just unhide these, and in this example here, let's move this on a little bit. We can see that yeah, at the start of the year you can see the conditional formatting. We were above our target for a brief period of time. But if we move forward, we can see we've got the bullet chart either in the horizontal aspect or the vertical aspect. But I do think, based on the type of data, and it's important, is the context and the type of data that's being actually measured. Cumulatively, it does make kind of sense to see this gauge. I do quite like it. Bullet charts are good, they're excellent, and they would always be the first port of call. And in fact, there's an example in a second where I think a bullet chart is more appropriate. But I think it makes the same impact as having a gauge in this particular example here. So one example where it might be a good application. Next, we're going to look at the next one here, which is percentage. So if we've got a display of a percentage, and that percentage can't go above 100%, then we've got a defined upper limit. So a gauge, again, could be potentially used. So in this example here, we're looking at the availability of a piece of equipment. So what percentage of the day is it available, or what percentage of the month or the year is it available against a target. We can see that is the same sort of concept there. We've got this conditional formatting that we've used If you want to see what that is, we can just see that it's very similar to the other one. We're just comparing the actual value against the target value, and we've either got the fill is either green or it's red. Now this is probably less than an appropriate one because it's either going to be always red or always green, because most of the time the data is going to be close to this target here or 0, or close to this target, which is going to mean it's either going to be always red or always green. If it's offline at 0, then it's going to be obviously white, and there's going to be no need for this fill. So if we look at it from a bullet chart point of view, we can see here that this is probably a more appropriate application for a bullet chart. It takes up less space, first of all, and I just think it makes it, there's no reason for it to be like a gauge availability. It's just a chunk of time that's available. I mean, even a card, but this is quite useful to basically be able to see the availability against a target. We've got an upper target of 100%, so in this example here, if you were thinking about using a gauge, I would probably err on the side or sway towards using a bullet chart. Okay, so that's an okay application of it. The next one is where we've got a range of different options, so a temperature. So again, we're looking at a temperature. Have we got a defined upper value? Well, with a temperature of something, you pretty much have, because some things can never go above a certain temperature. In this example here, we've got a bearing, so the upper temperature of this bearing before it completely fails is going to be 160 degrees. It may be able to go higher than that, but that's a sensible upper range. And it's a bit like body temperature. If you've got a body temperature and the gauge is set to go up to 100 degrees, then that's unreasonable. Whereas if you set to, say, 40 degrees, probably dead by that point, but that 37, 38 degrees is probably a sensible upper limit for that. So we've definitely got an upper limit here. The other point here that I want to demonstrate is that we've actually created a range. So I want it to be within certain bandings. I want there to be a different conditional format and different colours displayed. So I'll show you how I've done that. Let's go to our temperature, and we've set up the target. So I've just put the target in here. If we look at the temperature target, it's just a static value of 80. And we can see it's there. It's quite hard to see it, but it is there because the current value is also 80. And I've got conditional formatting, and I've used that conditional formatting to actually determine what colour the fill is. And in here, rather than just being above or below, I've actually set up a measure that actually looks at whether it's above a certain value. So if the current temperature is above 150 or equal to 150, then it's red. And again, we can use the hexadecimal hashtag with 6 characters after it to be really precise with the conditional formatting. I've just put these in because it's quick. The current temperature, if it's greater than 120, it's orange, and if it's greater than 90, then it's yellow. Otherwise, it's green, and that's why we're seeing green here because it's 80. So it doesn't meet the first, doesn't meet the second, doesn't meet the third. So it defaults to whatever the last option is here, which is green. So if I go now and change this, we can see it's gone up to 93, so it's yellow. It's a horrible colour, the yellow, but just for demonstration purposes, it's fine. And then it's orange, and then finally, if it's above 150, it's red. So we can see that this has got a meaning. We can see that the further to the right hand side it goes, the worse it is. So there's a gradient, almost like a gradient there, and it does make sense for the temperature. The other option is, if I go into the view, the other option we've got is to display a bullet chart, and we can see straight away the obvious benefit of that, and that is that we can see where each of the bandings start and finish. So we've got the target there, which is quite subtle, but we can clearly see the current value, and we can see that in comparison to the target and in comparison to each of the different bandings. So I would definitely consider using a bullet chart here. You can download visualizations which have got a gauge that give you the same functionality from the App Store or the Get More Visualizations. But if you want something that you want to stick to to make sure it's approved, so you can use it. But this one here, I think, is a better application. Both of these fit in with people's expectations. You know, a thermometer is normally straight, but a temperature gauge in a car, for example, can be curved. So, you know, you could probably use either one of them, but not this one here. You need to download one that's got the actual bandings built into it, which are available. Okay, so let's just see this building up again. Yeah, you can see it's down here. We can see how far it is to the next banding, or once we're in a banding, how far into that we actually are. Yeah, so if we go to this one here, we're just in the yellow, so it might not be as bad as it looks. You know, we're in yellow, but we're not right into yellow and almost into orange. Right, so hopefully that's been helpful to understand how you set up a gauge and understand just some considerations of the data that's being displayed with the gauge and how you could actually set it up. Whether it's a data, and the key takeaway here is it must be something that's got an upper value so that this fill actually means something in comparison to that upper value. Okay, so if you found this useful, I'd appreciate it if you could give it a thumbs up. If you like to keep up to date with the latest videos, then click the subscribe button and also click the bell, and you'll get a notification whenever I release a video, which is almost or more or less every week. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you in the next video.